The proclamation to deploy the National Guard to the border came days after President Trump sent a series of tweets about a caravan of several hundred migrants traveling north in Mexico from Central America. President Trump accused the caravan of trying to take advantage of DACA while calling on Mexico to stop them from reaching the U.S. This migration is an annual event. We learned more about its origins from Elizabeth Oglesby, an associate professor with the University of Arizona Center for Latin American Studies.
This is a caravan that has been going on for about 7 years. It's called the Via Crucis Migrante, and what that means is the Station of the Cross for migrants. And so it generally takes place around Easter week, and that is because in Latin America there's a custom of public processions during Easter week, so people can relate to that. It also brings up the issue of the plight of migrants from a humanitarian perspective. So it links to religious ideas about care for the poor and the desperate.
Is part of the mission to come to the United States?
Mostly it's a way to help provide safe passage for the migrants through Mexico, as well as draw attention to their plight, the reasons why they are fleeing their home countries, and the conditions that many migrants face as they transit through Mexico. This is not a storming of the border. And again, only a small percentage of the group will actually come all the way north. Many people never intended to come all the way to the United States. Last year, I believe 150 came to the border, so that's about 10% of the overall caravan. What they're doing now in Mexico, they went to a migrant rights symposium in Mexico where they were meeting with attorneys. And what those attorneys are doing is interviewing the migrants to see whether they have a credible claim for asylum. And those that may have a credible claim for asylum either will apply in Mexico or, again, a small percentage might continue on to the United States.
You have said that this caravan has existed for 7 years or so. Why the attention this time?
This time there was an embedded reporter from BuzzFeed News who was sending back reports, and those reports were published with very sensationalistic headlines that this caravan was going through Mexico and nobody could stop it, almost as if it were a meteor about to hit Arizona or Texas. The BuzzFeed News reports were picked up by conservative media like Fox News, in which we know that President Trump watches and responds to. So I think those factors came together to create a response that we hadn't seen before.
Just this week, the U.S. Border Patrol apprehended a group of 60 people from Central America who were claiming asylum, but there was also an MS-13 gang member mixed in with the bunch. How often does that happen, where you have someone with wrong intentions trying to blend in?
It's so infrequent that it's almost an invisible number. And I'm citing here data from the Border Patrol. That last year, the Border Patrol released data that said since 2011, out of 250,000 unaccompanied minors that showed up at the border, only 56 were identified as members of gangs. So it's almost an invisible number.
According to Customs and Border Protection, since 2012, agents have apprehended about 160 unaccompanied minors believed to have gang affiliations. Among that group, 56 had ties to MS-13. When you factor in adults, the number of suspected or confirmed gang members stopped at the border jumps to 5,000. And so in your research, you have found that this is not as you said, a storming of the border, but there is, for some, they do make it to the U.S. border. Do they apply for asylum when they get here, or do they attempt to make an undocumented crossing?
Members who come in an organized fashion with publicity tend to apply for asylum. Of course, there are many Central Americans who either do not have the information that they need to apply for asylum or are too afraid to apply for asylum, who do attempt to cross without authorization. One thing that is important for people in Arizona to understand is that people have a right to apply for asylum. That doesn't mean they have a right to receive asylum. You have to have a credible fear of persecution on the basis of race, religion, nationality, or membership in a particular group or political opinion. So not everybody from Central America will receive asylum, But according to international and national law, people have the right to apply for asylum at our border. So the fact that Central Americans are showing up at the border asking for asylum is not in and of itself a breach of any law. In fact, it is entirely legal and it is entirely what should happen.